Good morning, guys. My name is Sean Robertson. I'm with Peterson Power Systems. Basically, the way that we've structured things with Peterson is that after they have sold it to the contractor, installed it, now today will be your startup day, and after this, I'll be your point of contact. So for service, for quoting, anything like that, I pick up my phone way too much. So, feel free, give me a call. I'm in Multnomah County, Clark County, all the way out to the Dalles. I'll leave a card on a sticky note right here, and then I'll give a couple out to you guys, so that way you have it. Also, we have our 1-800 line. That's the other best way, that if it's a truly emergency, best thing to do is just bypass me altogether, get straight to the service department, try and get somebody out as quick as you can. We'll kind of go over some stuff that I look for, especially if you have certain codes and certain things that happen that are typical, and how to reset those, what to do. And feel free to either call the service department or me, and I'll try and walk you through it, save you the service call. That's the best thing to do. Always just try and remember that even though when the power goes out, if this doesn't start, the transfer switch doesn't go, try not to panic and go crazy. I know it's hard because you're going to have 5 people standing over your shoulder screaming at you, telling you to get this thing running, the power's out. Better to take it slow and really go step by step. And we can kind of go over what my 2 cents are on the transfer switch when we go down there. Today we'll focus mostly up here on the generator itself and the EMCP panel. So that being this panel right here, this is your main hub for everything you're going to be doing. It's the EMCP 4.2, really nice panel. There's some things that are really nice about it, and then there's ways that you can upgrade it to make it even more, in sync with you guys' system, is the best way I can put it. So it sounds like Danny, you're mainly the one doing the rounds, things like that. Is anybody else gonna have hands on it? For the most part, probably not. Okay, so we'll kind of go over it quick once over, and then maybe if Danny, if you have some more in-depth questions, I can answer them afterwards. When it comes to this system, I think the electrician is going to talk to what this is actually powering. So what do you say was on the system itself?
So what we have on this generator feeds emergency egress lighting, obviously exit signs, all that. It has IDF rooms, all the HVAC controls, the door stuff, all that is off of standby power, which is off of this. There's also elevator machine rooms. An elevator, like the car lights, all that is off of this standby system.
Perfect.
Any of the refrigeration?
That is correct, yep. The freezers and the coolers in the kitchen are also off of that, like the
life safety. So once you put yourself into that category, there's some weekly, monthly, yearly, and 3-year things that you guys need to be thinking about in your head. I always joke, but you guys probably know it's true more than me. Train your managers to get it in the budget now, especially when it's brand new and they just spent the money on it, to put it in for service the proper way. Otherwise, 3 years from now, it's not going to be getting done, and sooner or later it usually comes downhill, and it falls on the guy who's poor guy doing weeklies, recommending all the things to do, and nobody's ever doing them. So when you get to NFPA 110, what it really states that you guys need to know is its manufacturer recommendations. So you can take your O&M manual and you can read through it, and if you're not doing what it says in there, you're out of compliance. Second portion of it is that you need to be doing a weekly walk around. We'll do what a weekly looks like here, and then once a month you need to be doing an actual building transfer, transferring load over from main source onto the generator. And now that's where which fire marshal you get is going to be a little pickier than others. Some people get away with never doing that. Other ones don't get away with even not doing weeklies. So I would just recommend do it by the book. Make sure it's all done right. We put this book together, and I'll leave a copy with you guys. Pretty nice little book, put it together. The first page is who we are, everything else. This is the section that you guys are going to want to read, and anybody who misses this to go back over as well. It's weekly. You guys all look like you probably know how to check the oil, check the coolant, do normal things. It's pretty self-explanatory. We'll kind of walk through what a one-page looks like. What I do, what I look for is probably going to be different than some of the things you guys look for. So I'll try and point out some of those things today. But this is a good checklist for if you have a new guy that's coming on that's going to be doing those weeklies. This is what I would make them read, honestly. Next would be what yearly. So if you guys are doing service yourself, there's certain things that you need to be doing yearly. You can get away with what we call a green annual, which is where you're doing oil and filters. The next year you're only doing filters, and then oil and filters. In order to do that, you need to be sampling every 6 months. So you have to see the trends of your oil, how contaminated and how bad it is, to show that you can just spin filters rather than doing oil and filters. So something to think about, especially if you're going to serve yourself. When you do your monthly transfers, if you are not above 30% load, so when you transfer this over, I'll show you how to look at your kilowatts and your load percentage. Then once a year, you are required to do an 1.5 hour load bank. So half an hour at 50% load and the last hour at 75% load or more. Now, if you were doing your buildings transfers every month religiously like you're supposed to, and you could show that it was above 30% every month, then you can get away from doing the yearly load banks and get to the 3rd year load bank to a 4-hour load bank. They changed the code last year, I believe, where you can do your building transfer for 3 hours above 30%, and the last hour needs to be above 75%. You cannot do that by doing a building transfer, shutting it down, putting a load bank on and going. It has to be seamless 4 hours. I know that because I've been a technician and I've had a unit shut down at 3 hours and 45 minutes. Start the test back over again. It has to be 4 hours seamless. If the fire marshal even catches it, they will make you redo it. So food for thought. That's why it's important to know what your monthly transfers are, because it might get you away from having to do more service than you really have to. So just that portion of it alone is kind of nice. Caterpillar recommends every 3 years to do a cooling service. I've been doing this for a while, and I would recommend you do that on all makes and models. You're going to notice, I'm sure Danny can speak to it, or some of you other guys, at 3 years, you'll start feeling the hoses, belts, and everything else start cracking, getting hard, brittle. It's just the name of the game with these. These diesels do not have glow plugs, so they're sitting with a block heater running 24 hours a day. And so it's just really hard on it to weekly start up, get hot, get cold. Once a month, run for 30 minutes under load, come back down. It's not where we're getting on the freeway, running everything out, coming back. That's why you can get more life out of belts and hoses on a car compared to here. They're gonna get cracked, they're gonna get brittle. We'll kind of go over what ones I look for specifically when we get over the other side. I want to mention as much as I can now, because once we get over there, we're all going to be shoulders and a lot of us have to see it. So that is part of what Caterpillar recommends on the 3 year. What differs us a lot of the time is that we do thermostats every 3 years. Most manufacturers don't actually have a spec on that. All right, yeah, kind of I'll repeat what I was just talking with Danny. Is one other thing that they added this year was fuel sampling. So 2 years ago, NFPA started saying fuel sampling. The reason that the code even got enforced and why it's being enforced even more is all the floods, hurricanes, everything else. It really happened really bad with all the nursing homes. I hate to say it, I go to a lot of places. Nursing homes are usually the worst about maintenance on their units. Why, I couldn't tell you, but you know, usually it's take one little unit and add on different leaves to a nursing home and keep adding. It's like they got a little 15 kilowatt in the corner that's like, you know, that kind of thing. So where they started enforcing it was they seen all the, you know, flaws and different things they were doing. So fuel sample came up, and it was, we all know diesel lasts longer, but how long does it last or anything else? Nobody knows without testing it, adding the additives that you need and doing what you need to do. So we actually invested a lot of money into a fuel polishing setup so that we can start testing every year and then actually sampling. You'll notice that, you know, anywhere from, depending on where you're getting your fuel, do you guys know if you're forced to use the B5? Is red? Okay. Keep it that way, please. Please, please. Don't, you know, if you can avoid moving to the new biofuels and some of the other things, CAT can't keep going after every new fuel that comes out. So we have a standard, we put it there and let other people make their decisions. Just know from experience with other places that have moved that direction that it's kind of like running synthetics in an old hot rod. It just wasn't ready for it. It wasn't, the seals aren't ready for a lot of things. So, you know, I can't speak one way or another whether that would happen, but I can tell you what our standards are, and they're there for a reason. So same with thermostats and some of the other things that we put on there. The maintenance recommendations, a lot of people will, you know, say, wow, that seems extreme to do that every year. There's a reason that they're there. You know, some way, shape, and form, we found a failure. We chased it enough times that we know that you need to be inspecting it every year. So, like I said, if you can try and train the management, train people up top that these are things that are just going to be in the budget and need to be in the budget, the more success you guys are going to have with this very expensive piece of equipment. So, usually they know up front. Any questions, concerns so far? No? All right, we'll get into the little spiel on a weekly here. We kind of set it up really nicely. I can't tell you this is exactly what the fire marshal wants, but what I can tell you is that I haven't seen a single one that didn't like this setup and didn't check the box for you guys doing your weeklies off of what we have here. They have other examples. You can Google it and look it up. When you see theirs compared to these, it's pretty much the exact same. Sometimes what they'll have is more AC and voltage per line. So ours just has a general, this is your voltage, this is your kilowatts and amps. Theirs might have actual line to line, or, you know, anything in between that they specifically wanted, but I haven't seen anybody that didn't like it. We'll start kind of where it's easy. The panel's set up really nice. You kind of just leave it in these two buttons right here. You cannot hurt anything on there. So you'll notice right here you have 2.71 hours. So your service runtime 2.7. Runtime is going to be from next week. You're going to see that it's 2.8.1 runtime. So doesn't seem very important here, but when you get down to once a month you're doing your building transfer, now you've ran it for 30 minutes. Now they can see your runtime was this a week. Once a month you did your transfer, and then that's where they'll see that you actually did what you were supposed to, 30 minutes of a building transfer once a month. The other portion where they'll catch you on that is AC voltage and frequency. You'll have that every week, so it'll be 0 amps, 0 amps, 0 amps. Once a month you'll do a building transfer, you'll have amps on there. So they'll be able to see your runtime and your amps. That proves that you've done your weeklies. It proves that you've done your building transfer and that you recorded how much load is actually on it. Those are the things that they really want to see. If they get nitpicky, sorry, you got a bad fire marshal. You know, I've seen worse, I've seen better. So kind of going down the list, we set it up really easy. Fuel, you want it to be above 75%. At 90, you're going to have a high fuel. 95, it'll have a high fuel shut off, so it won't let you fill more than that. Those get tested during startup, and usually we'll have the alarm going off for a while until you can burn that fuel off and get it down low enough to where it's not at that 90%. What I recommend is when you're doing your monthly transfers or even your weekly, you start watching what your fuel gallons per minute burn is, and then also start tracking that over your annuals and your load banks and things like that, so you can start justifying in your head, okay, if I do monthlies, weeklies, and I do my annuals with the load bank at this much load, I'm going to need to fuel every 3 years or every 4 years. This isn't going to burn a lot of fuel. You're not going to be, you know, unless you have a 5-6 day power outage, you're not going to be burning a lot of fuel with this, because I doubt the load is 10-15%. Yeah, it's very minimal. It's probably all LED lights. Very, very low load on this. What we always try and spec all of these to is full load, 24-hour runtime. That's a really good rule of thumb. My personal suggestion is that if you have a power outage that's more than 12 hours, get on the phone, get your name in the queue, get on the list, because everybody else in town is going to be calling for fuel too. Even though Carson and everyone else does a really good job, when you have that many people calling in, it's whoever was on the list first. So if you have a more than about 12-hour run time, I'd be getting on the phone, or at least have somebody here check in where your level's at. Just my recommendations. I see in the snowstorms, usually somebody's sitting at like 60-70%, thought they were good, start burning for 2 days, and then they're panicking to try and get fuel. It never works out well. So that's where the fuel is. We say above 75, below 90. Oil, we'll check the dipstick on the other side. Something you guys might not know, teach you something I learned in CAT school, is that when you're checking oil, you're actually not supposed to do it after it's ran. You want to pull the dipstick, do not wipe it off, look at where it's at, and slide it right back down in there. The reason behind that is that you are actually putting contaminants back in off of your rag every time. And these engine tolerances are so tight now that you think about, once or twice, not that big of a deal. Every week with the same dirty rag that's laying underneath the engine, we all, pretty guilty of doing. Dirty, dirty, dirty. How many times you put that back in there is not there. So the only time you actually do wipe that, or you will do that, is if you were to have a building power outage, it shut down on low oil pressure, which is a hard shutdown. Then obviously you would be going over there and need to wipe it, check it, and put it back in, top off the oil if that were the case, and get yourself back up and running. Other than that, it always should be cold, and just not wiping it off, checking where it's at, always at the high end. Never want to have it in the in-between or on the low side. We always just go with the high end of the stick. So full mark right at it. Going down the line on here, coolant, we'll show you where you can check that. It's up top. More than likely you'll probably have to get yourself a ladder to be able to crawl up there and pop the cap and do that. I don't know what you guys' standards are on fall protection and that kind of thing. So if that does become some kind of an issue, some people will build like a nice catwalk for the side of it to be able to walk up. Just food for thought if that's something that comes up for you guys. Batteries, we have a full in here. That's for non-maintenance free batteries. Old style where you can pull the cap and still do hydrometer, anything else. These are maintenance free batteries. Code finally allowed us to go with maintenance free batteries on life safety. They might change that tomorrow. You just never know with them. It's back and forth. Battery charger, that's part of one of your checks, and you can have it 2 different ways. You're going to see you have 13.5 volts here. I always recommend to not get used to just trusting this panel, to walk around and check the actual battery charger, and you're going to see that the amps needle is just a little bit off 0, just to get food, a good rule of thumb to not be pencil whipping, because it's really easy to just leave this book in here, come out here, open the door, pencil whip it, put it back in and walk away. If you can get used to doing your weeklies where you're actually walking around and checking some of the things that we'll check here, it's going to be way better off. You're going to catch things before they fail. That's another one of the ones, is block heater. So you can get your temperature right off of here while it's running, but I always suggest to walk over and put your hand on it, and that kind of goes with the fact that you're going to start checking how hard and brittle that hose is. Sometimes the hoses don't last the full 3 years, and you can call ahead of time and say, we need to get these changed out sooner rather than later.
Sean, does it say the temperature then on that gauge?
Not when it's not running, but you'll see the Fahrenheit 000 Fahrenheit right there. The second that you start this, or it's doing this weekly, then you're going to see the temperature right there on the screen. Same thing we talked about on AC, frequency, and amps right here. These 2 buttons, like I said, there's nothing in either one of these that you can do to harm this. Play with it. The more you play with it, the better off you're going to be, because you're going to start seeing things that are out of spec. You're going to be like, well, every week that's always 60, and this week it's 10. What's going on? It's running rough. So AC right here, this main screen is just like your engine main screen. You got your voltage, your amps, your hertz, and your kilowatts and percentage. This is the main screen you're really going to use, but it's not bad to start scrolling down through, because once you start doing that, you're going to see you have line to line on each one of them. So if you start noticing you have one leg that's just way crazy high or low, it might be a red flag for you guys to start thinking about, especially whether everything's still under warranty, everybody's still on site, anything like that. The more you do that, the better. Going back, I guess we'll just stay right here since we're all here and kind of just go through this. Where's the annunciator panel that would ring? Is it in an office?
Down in the custodial office.
Not going to bother anybody or anything like that though? Okay. So I'll simulate an alarm here, what it would be like if you came out here. I'm just going to put it in stop. This is what you typically hear when you come out here. Acknowledge button will make it be quiet and let you know that you have an alarm. There's two different lights here. There's a yellow and there's a red. Red is a hard shutdown. So something that really protects itself. Low oil pressure, low coolant, overspeed, underspeed, high voltage, low voltage, a lot of different like where you could actually do damage to the engine or the generator in will be a hard shutdown. So you'll see it's red. Same thing, acknowledge it. Now what I want you guys to notice here is that this is the event log right here. Now we have 3 codes in here. I'm going to go in here and you're going to see that I have emergency shutdown, gen not in auto, and high fuel warning. Those are the only 3 codes in here that I'm looking at. What I do want you guys to notice is that they say present on here. All of those are either active or present. So you need to fix the problem before it's going to let you reset it. It's going to force you to put it in stop to be able to reset any code. 2 reasons behind that. One, to make you stop, slow down, figure it out. And the other is that if it did shut down on a low coolant, anything else, when it was on its weekly run, the ATS is still sending a start signal. So if you were able to reset it in auto, and this is more for probably some of your older units, you leave that in auto and you went in there to top off the coolant, the second it gets above that sensor, it's going to restart on you again. And you guys wouldn't want to be in a fan blade with it starting up on you and going under full load. So always make sure you put it in stop before you try and reset something. With the e-stop, I showed it for you guys to see what a hard shutdown is. I would not recommend using that unless it truly is, you're hearing knocking noises, you're seeing flames, you're seeing something horrific. And the reasoning is because it has no cool down or anything that's going to allow it to let the turbo spool down and the oil. You are hard shutting that thing down. So you are going to end up seals, turbos, things like that. You'll go through them real quick if you're using that all the time to shut things off. So you saw I pulled it out. When I go to reset this, hold it, it's going to say reset all events. Okay, yes, I want to reset them. Now it's going to go through and it's going to say what has or has not been reset. And you're going to notice something. Engine shutdown, the hard, that reset. Following could not reset. Not in auto, because I'm not in auto. High fuel warning, because it still has a high fuel warning. But those are just a warning. Those aren't a hard shutdown. So those are the kind of the difference in there, what it will or will not let you reset. If you guys can take anything from me today, take the ABCs: auto, breaker, charger. We broke it down as easy as we possibly could. The logic behind it, excuse me, is that if you're doing your weekly checks, you know you have fuel, you're doing your monthly transfers, that if you come out here and you do anything on it, when you leave, if you make sure it's in auto, back in auto, your breaker is closed and your battery charger is charging, that set yourself up for the most success that you can possibly have with this unit, because you know it's going to start, you know it's going to send voltage, and the batteries are charged enough to be able to get it to start. All the other things should be being done during your normal maintenance. And I'll tell you how many times that when you don't do ABCs, you're going to be driving home and be like, man, did I put that thing in auto? You know, calling somebody to try and get them, put them back in auto. So ABCs, auto, breaker, charger. That's what I always try and preach to people. Any questions on here, concerns, anything on there? No? Okay, we'll move around to the corner here. Try and get as many guys in there as we can. Basis is you're going to check from one side and work your way around it. That's where I try to talk about not pencil whipping it. because if you can start on one side and always be working your way around the same side and then end up at the panel, that's going to set you up for the most success. Sorry, I don't know which way to face. Sorry. Right here is your primary fuel filter. You're going to see on the bottom of this, there's a nice little sight glass right here. This is going to be your first indication you're getting bad fuel. So you start getting nasty gunk and dirt and water in there. You can drain it right here, crack it open, drain it down. Once you've done that, you've now just entered air into your system. After you do that, you're going to need to use your priming handle and actually prime it. These ones work pretty good. I know some of the older units have little thumb primers that don't work where the hell. So, you know, you really aren't supposed to fill filters. A lot of people have always said one way or another, but according to what we've all been taught through Caterpillar, once you fill a filter, you've now just put contaminants in there that never got filtered through. So we always recommend, if you do change these out, to not actually fill these, and you're just going to have to use the hand primer, prime those back up. Make sure the hand primer's closed. The reason I keep on pointing out the hand primer is for two reasons. One, this is your usual best way to get it back up and running. So if you come out here and there's an overcrank alarm, that means that it went through 3 cycles. So this thing's going to try and run 3 times. Crank, 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 stop, rest, crank, 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 stop, rest, and then go again. So if you've made it to all 3 and it says overcrank, and it'll say not started overcrank, then this is where I'd be going to see if you lost your prime. Because really that's one of the main things that you're going to have overcrank, is just not getting fuel. Here are 2 separators as well. So just along with the same thing with oil, how tight the tolerances are, fuel is even tighter. Electronic injectors, everything else that goes through the system is so tight that getting bad fuel is one of the worst things you can do for this engine, other than running it without oil. That would be a lot worse. Oil filter right here. You'll see a sample port right here, and there's also a green one that's for coolant. That's so that way you can take active live samples while it's running. That's the best way to take a sample. I know a lot of people like to take them through the dipstick. Then you don't know what you're getting. You're getting to the bottom of the tank, middle, top of it. You're getting clean oil, dirty oil. If it's running, you're going to get the best sample right here. And every 6 months is what's recommended. Most people are just doing it once a year when they change the oil. But the more you do it, the better you can see a trend of brass, copper, anything like that. Get that ahead of time so that way you don't throw a rod through the side of the block, something that you found. Not a whole lot on this side other than oil fill. Here's your dipstick tube for checking it. Just like I said, pull it out right at the top of the line and then put it right back in. Coolant is all the way up to the top of the radiator, so you actually do have to climb up there, or there is a cap at the top. So whether you put a ladder out here or most people just climb up and check it up there. I always put it in stop, so that way you're not draped across there trying to pop the cap. Lower radiator hose, upper radiator hose. I always say to try and feel things and grab a hold of them. Feel these hoses right now, day 1. And you're going to feel them a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now, and you're going to see they're starting to get cracked, brittle, hard. Just things I look for on there. Genin, a lot of things that you're going to want to look for on here mainly is rodents. Mice are the biggest culprit, but last year alone I think we had 3 different EMCP panels go from bees. Bees will get in there, especially those mud bees will make their nest and short from one to another, and they cause a lot of damage, like a $3,000 panel from just some bees. So bees and mice. Mice are the other ones. Airflow in the generator actually comes from the back end, and this is the out of the airflow. So if mice get in here, they just take a ride, real gross, makes a nasty mess. They get in the back end over there, start talking about thousands of dollars worth of stuff. You got your rectifiers, everything else back there, that once they start nibbling on those, you got to think what you would take to get this thing out of here. So you got to either lift the whole enclosure, or you got to put jib cranes in here, and you got to pull the generator in, slide it out, get it out of here, and then go get it rewound, all from mice, you know. So if you see them, I would start putting out poison today if it were me. But you know, if you start seeing them in the enclosure, then you definitely want to get ahead of those. That is one of the bigger ones that we see making a nasty mess on there. Questions, concerns this side? Nope. Go around to the other side real quick. So on this side of the engine, there's a few things that I'll point out. There's not a lot to look for on this side. One thing that I always try and point out though, they do have a serial number right here, and you have a serial number for the engine. When you call in, you want to call in with this serial number right here, and it's WG300427. So it's just the last bit of it right there. That's actually your package or your group number. So we can find your unit from the other two, but when the power's out, you don't want us to be looking up something in a system to figure that out. You give us that number, we know where you are, who you are, where it's located, everything about it, and that's the fastest way to get us out and get us working. Also, you'll see here is all the spec unit information. The main ones you look at is just that it's a 200 kilowatt unit, but if somebody were asking model number, that's where you find it. The serial numbers here again. The beginning of it, you'll see that it's CAT 00C7, it's the engine, everything like that. It's just like a car VIN number. Really only the last little bit is where it's actually important and what somebody references. Moving around, kind of hard to see from where you're at, but there's the block heater right here. So like I was saying, I would suggest everybody put their hand on that today, and you're going to feel how warm that is and what the hoses feel like. You'll notice in about a year, 2 years, you're not going to be able to squeeze it like I am today. And then you're also going to notice when you have a low coolant alarm, you'll walk over here, this will be ice cold. And that I always say to do, because that way, if you do have that alarm, you're calling us and saying, I took a picture, I saw what the alarm was, send it to me, send it to service department. We're coming with the block heater rather than driving out here, hey, your block heater's bad. Driving back, getting one, driving back, and you spend a whole day for something we could have came out in 2 hours and fixed. So if you can take a picture of what the alarm is and kind of go out and do a 1, 2, 3 with somebody on the phone and say, I checked here, I checked to make sure that the breaker for the block heater, which is on the other side, it's just a 120 breaker panel, make sure that's reset, make sure inside the building where it's actually fed from, it's all reset. That saves you guys a service call. So we're always here to try and help you on that end. Everybody's busy. So here's the battery like we were talking about. I usually just pop the caps instead of having a full and looking for the fluid. I just use that as checking that they're not corroded and nasty and dirty. Something I usually do. Working through, you just want to watch to make sure that you're not getting a lot of oil or anything else coming from your headers. I don't know if you guys have ever seen or heard of wet stacking. So wet stacking is when you're running it so often without any load on it that what it does is it builds up fuel and oil inside the cylinders, and the first place that you'll see that come out is the bottom side of all of your exhaust manifold. So you'll start seeing it wet at the bottom of that and it looks like an oil leak. That's actually what they call wet stacking, and it's from just running it without enough load all the time that you'll start getting oil and buildup. The problem with that is that if you don't get the load on it and burn that out, the fuel will actually wash your cylinder liners. So all your hatch marks in it will go away because you're just sitting there. Best way you can describe it is like running your car for a month at idle and never getting up on the freeway. You're just going to build up a lot of junk in there. So watch for that. If that starts happening, you might start thinking about doing either less time on your weekly. So move it from a 10-minute or a 15-minute run to a 10-minute, or a 10-minute to a 5-minute, or doing your building transfer for a longer period. So it's under load for a longer time to try and burn that out. So it's just something to think about, especially on the older units, you'll see it. Belts right here, you'll also notice that you're gonna wanna start looking at those. If you put it in stop, you can actually just grab them, twist them. Rule of thumb, you don't wanna be able to twist it all the way around a circle. Halfway around a twist is about where you want attention to be. That's a quick check. There's a fancy tool that can tell you how many inches it bend it is. I wouldn't suggest buying it, it's not worth using. Exhaust, I always just check here, up there, everywhere else. Make sure none of that wrap is coming loose. Last thing you want is that wrap to come loose and go through your fan. Just something to think about. And you'll start seeing, if you start seeing black soot coming from there and it's getting worse and worse, everything I always try and tell you guys, You have 2 years of warranty, get it under warranty. You know, we're more than happy to come out under warranty. We get paid, we're all happy. We're not, you know, we're not against warranty by any means. Cat pays on every warranty claim I've ever turned in, so don't feel bad if you find something. It's better to get it now. That's why playing with it, playing with the panel, running it, getting used to it is the better off you're going to be. And with the transfer switch and everything else, I'm sure you guys are probably about a year warranty or less. So the more you're doing transfers and the more you have all these guys that did all the work here, the better off you're going to be. So if they're already saying, well, that's because you did a building transfer, shouldn't be that way. You should be able to do a building transfer monthly because that's what code says, without it causing fire panel alarms or whatever. There's settings for everybody, so you should be able to do time delay to say that this does a building transfer and you're okay once a month. So just getting ahead of it now is the best thing I can try and tell you guys. Questions, concerns? Who remembers the ABCs?
Breaker, charger, yeah.
Man, I would say you got the closest. You get a hat. You didn't get the last one. He got the last one. You got the first one. I don't know.
Is that the airfield?
Collective thinking.
Yeah, right here.
How often do you shoot?
It's as recommended. So usually we do it during our cooling service every 3 years, but really it's as recommended. And with the one like this, it's pretty cheap. You get into some of these bigger units. The reason I even talk about green annuals, you're talking about 110 gallons of oil. This is like 7. So it's, you know, in comparison, it's not that much, but it still is an option. So, you know, and when the air filters, these are usually like 40, 50 bucks. The ones on those bigger units are like 160 a piece. Sometimes you have 4 to 5 of them. So adds up when, you know, you're doing them every 3 years compared to just as needed. Any other questions, concerns? Good?
Sean, is there anything else we need to learn out here before we go into the transfer switch room?
Not too much, no. Yeah.
Well, if you guys feel comfortable with this, I'm going to lead you guys on to our transfer switch room, and I'll call our electrician and we'll meet there.
All right. So, like I was saying, I don't think I'm technically supposed to do training on this, but I'm going to give you my 2 cents on them. I've done a lot of ATS inspections, kind of the way I went in my career before I sold my soul and became a salesman. So, what I will go over on this is that these sometimes go out of sight, out of mind pretty quick and pretty easy. They do need to be inspected once a year. And to inspect them, you're going to need to have your arc flash gear open up, clean it out, and a lot of the times what we'll actually do is be testing voltage live, hot on both sides. So we'll actually be able to probe on both sides and see if what the screen is reading is going to be the same as what the voltage is. So that way you can start seeing line to line whether or not it's right, and also you can start seeing what they call like a hot leg, or you start seeing where your arc chute contacts. Like I'm sure you guys have seen that a lot of the requirements tell you to be doing thermal imaging, and the reason behind that is because you can see the hot arc in there. So without doing building transfers once a month, they're going to sit there forever, and then every once in a while, wham, slam for a power outage. You can get the lazy fingers or the lazy chutes where they're going to start wearing faster than the other ones. So without doing inspections every year, cleaning them out, then you're never going to know that. For you guys, most of the part, you're going to be able to transfer this one of 2 ways. You notice that you have your transfer test, hold for 15 seconds. You would hold, it'll transfer. What is good about doing it this way, like I said, you might get lucky, you might not get lucky with the fire marshal. Some of them are really just by the book, and they want you to go over and actually open breakers. Don't do that. It's once a month you're using a breaker like a light switch, and the second that that breaker doesn't work or doesn't go back and you can't get it to go back, now you're having to call an electrician, do a PGE outage, because that is your hot side, and now you're doing that. So it's better to do it from here, because if this fails, then you're not having to call an electrician or anything. You can actually just open it up, do a manual transfer, start up the generator and run on that, or vice versa, transfer it back to utility manually and then get back up and running one way or another. But the difference is pretty significant when it's a bad day and you have to actually get an electrician to come out and do all of that, that's a big shutdown, big permits, big money compared to just doing your transfer once a month from here. And the other portion about doing it from here is you're actually going to start the generator. It's going to start up, run, make sure voltage, hertz, and everything else is good, and then transfer, in comparison to closing your breaker, opening your breaker, and then now you've lost power, generator has to start, and then transfer over. So if there's something that it doesn't like, then it might not ever transfer back. So you always want to do that. Something else I'll point out on ATSs is that more than likely you guys probably have between a 15-minute and a 30-minute time window for the setting. Typical time is usually like a 15-minute, but you can up that, and you guys know when the power goes out, it flickers. Every time it flickers, it starts that timer back over again. So I receive lots of phone calls like, hey, we had a power outage, the rest of the building's back up and going, but the generator's still running, it's been running. I've had people call me 2 days later. Like, the generator's been running for 2 days. That, I would say, is a little extreme, but if it's running for 2 or 3 hours, you're gonna see on here that it usually has little lines saying that it's still trying to sync. So it'll have a timer and it'll be sitting there trying to reboot, but it also wants to know the hertz are close, the volts are close. So if PGE is still having flickers, it's going to reset that timer. Reset that timer every time it does it, because it wants to see steady, normal power instead of being bam, 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 back and forth every time that it flickers. So just something to think about when it goes there. The main lights that you guys want to start watching, and I'm sure you guys have been to ATSs where the lights aren't working. Lights are super important. I like the lights because it's going to tell you that its normal source is available. You notice the generator is not running, so it's not available. It's selected to normal source. So if you think about this, electricians hate it when I tell you guys this, but I would get them to give you a one line. Simple, even if it's hand drawn on here, which is going to tell you where your normal source is. If I had to guess, it's probably right there. Normal source coming in is right here. So that's like your PGE coming in. Then here's your generator. Load is usually down in between. If you can get a simple one line, that's going to help you guys out. So if the power goes out and it doesn't transfer one way or another, when I get here, first thing I'm going to ask you is, where is your breaker there? I know there's the breaker on the generator, so I can safely shut that one off, but I'm going to want to know where this one is, and then also where your load breaker is. I'm going to shut off all three, open the door, manually transfer it to whatever source I want it to be on, then slowly reverse the process. So just like I was talking to you guys up there, slow down, think about what you're doing. Don't try and get in here and manually transfer it without knowing where all three of your sources are. That makes sense? Kind of going through. I was telling them maybe steal one line from you guys where this is fed from, where generator breaker is, and what load it feeds. Yep, just on a simple one line. I always print it out, put it right on there. It's just that much quicker that you guys know when the power's out of what to do. You can set this up. These are pretty nice switches to do weekly, monthly, and you can do like every other week and everything else. There's a lot of settings in there. Sounds like you guys are going to do Monday at 9 a.m. so I'll let them set that up for you guys, or 6 a.m. I think somebody said. I would recommend not doing the monthly transfer by automatic. I would make sure that one of you guys are here to actually flip them. So my usual routine on like a weekly is to go up there right before it's going to run, check my fluids, everything else, close the doors, walk away. You're going to hear it start, go fool around, do whatever you're going to do. Right before it's about to shut down, go back out there, open up the doors, make sure there's no coolant all over the ground, oil all over the ground. Take your readings, it'll shut down, make sure it's ABCs. Nobody.
Breaker and chargers.
Again, two people. That was the deal. So yeah, I always do that no matter what when I leave places. It's just good rule of habit to get into. Make sure it's back in auto breaker charger, and then go on with your day. With the monthlies, I do the same thing, but I go up there, check everything, make sure your breaker's on, because you're never going to send voltage. And if it's not an auto, when you flip your switch, it's not going to start. So there's where the ABCs come in and really play. Then come down here, do your transfer, hold for 15 seconds. It's going to transfer, run for whatever time delay they set it up for you guys. 30 minutes is what the code says it needs to be. Then it's going to go back over. It's going to have a 5-minute cooldown. So don't be worried if it doesn't shut down right away, because it is going to have 5 minutes to cool back down. And like I said, it's also going to want to make sure it sees the right parameters. So you go do this transfer, starts, runs, does 30 minutes, but it doesn't like that it's not the same hertz. It's going to keep on sitting there until it gets right where it wants to be. Then it will transfer off of load. Then it's going to go to the 5-minute cooldown.
So it doesn't run on a temperature cooldown?
No, it's just a 5-minute cooldown on those.
I got it, Franklin runs until it gets to a certain temperature and then it shuts down.
Yeah, and I think the reason Cat really doesn't like to do it that way usually is just because if you had low coolant or your thermostats were bad or anything like that, you're relying on something that might be a little bit off. So, but it does work, yeah. As long as you're getting the temperature back down, then you're letting the turbo spool back down. You got the oil going through it is what the main thing is, what they're looking for. So, questions, concerns?
I have something when you're... So, I'll get you guys a one-line for this, as far as where everything's coming from and all that. But do you guys want to see in real life where the breakers are, what could be turned off, what could be turned on, it's going to affect the system? Is that another thing you want to see with this? I mean, it seems like it's important. So.
Yeah, we want it.
Is this a good time?
Yeah.
Do it? Okay, absolutely. So here...
Just want to get your mic.
Okay, so what we have here is we have the generator outside. That comes in, these two 4-inch pipes here. That comes into here. And all these breakers need to be on for the system to work correctly. So you have a breaker here, a breaker for SB, which is standby power, and you have a breaker for E, which is emergency lighting, the emergency side of it. Each of these, anytime the generator comes on, they'll both come on. There's nothing that'll, unless the breaker's off, they'll both come on. So from there, they come into here through both to each transfer switch. Normal power comes in underground from MDS, so we can look at those breakers. So that kind of covers it in here. The electrical room will be the next spot to look at.
Two transfer switches.
Why is there? Because one's for emergency power and one's for standby power.
Okay.
And Chance, so you're going to show us the breakers that feed this?
Yes, I'll show you the breakers, the normal power that feeds this, so you know where that breaker is also. All the stuff in here, standby is here, emergency is here. Those are your two breakers in here. There's also the block heater breaker, which is out of the panel in the back corner, 2P003.
Make a hole, guys.
Let me unlock that. These are all going to be locked up. So the 60 amp breaker right here, circuit 33, that is your breaker for your block heater and all that. So if your block heater is not on, that your receptacle, and there's a panel schedule right here that'll tell you that that's exactly what it's for. It's for the generator.
Anything else we need to know?
That should cover all the breakers. Anyone have any questions?
What's that right behind you on the right? It says bypass.
This is for the auditorium lighting. This is a whole different system. So that'll be covered in a different owner meeting or owner.
What's it feeding? This is fed from, and that generator is the other, but what's it feeding? What panel is it feeding? The load.
The load side, I think, were those two panels on each side there.
Okay, say it again.
What's load? What's it feeding?
Oh, off the load of that? Yeah, that's a valid point.
Because you got
Yeah, that's a valid point. You're wondering where that goes to from there. So,
breakers and then where?
yes, it goes from here, normal power. Let's go back in the emergency electrical room here, guys. So low. Oh, wait till you got it in here. Everybody in here? Okay, so load out of this SB transfer switch goes to this panel here, and this goes out to all the different zones. And these are all labeled here. There's panels out in the field. They're labeled the same as this. So that's the standby. Load for the emergency comes out of this panel right here. Anything that's out of the emergency is here. And it goes and distributes throughout the field.
Do you guys have any more questions for Chance?